Gabby, the day is finally here. I can't believe it. Thanks for coming on the show, my friend.
I feel like we are meant to be good friends, but we've not found the full alignment yet. And this is what happens to me a lot when I get on someone's podcast who I love and admire, and I'm like, can we start our friendship here?
Yeah, right. That's like I'm same page. I feel the same way about you. And let's just get to be friends in front of hundreds of thousands of people. I mean,
Yeah,
it's fun.
here we are.
Last time I saw you in person, it was again random. I was in a studio recording for The Art of Being Well in New York, and you were in literally the room next to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we both heard each other's voice. I'm like, what, Gabby's in next door? And so we
Mm-hmm.
ran over and saw each other for a few minutes. But how is it? Are you in the city full time? What's that like?
I live in this city half 30% of the time, depending
Okay.
on the month. And then I live in the countryside, similar to you, up in the countryside,
Hmm.
outside the city, 60, 70% of the time.
Amazing. I think we first met professionally. We had you on Goopfellas, which is like
That's right.
Goop's
Uh-huh.
spin-off podcast back in the day. And I've from the sidelines admired your work for a long time. Just always just admire you, admire your bravery and the voice that you give this space. How is it? And I know writing books can be arduous to say the least. I mean, it's like giving birth and to craft these works of art. How has it been? This is your 10th book.
I like that question because I think that every book I've written has been a different type of journey.
Yeah.
Some of my books, one of my books in particular, I have such a fond memory of the journey of writing that book.
Hmm.
And it's actually my probably will maybe go down in history as my best book or one of my best books, and that's The Universe Has Your Back.
Hmm.
And I recall the time that I was writing that book and the feelings emotionally and spiritually that were moving through me as I wrote that book. And I remember it was a really difficult time in my life. I had just remembered a trauma from my childhood that had been dissociated for 30 years. I was 36 at the time. So I had this trauma memory come to me in a dream. And then, at the same time, I had this deadline for this book. And it was one of those periods in my life where somehow I didn't have to travel that much. It was sort of just God's grace that I was not pushed into a lot of travel. And I had this period where I was in this mountain house. I didn't have a child yet. And I was sitting in this whitewashed little tiny perched up room on the second floor of the house and looked out onto the mountains. And it was just all the floors were white and the ceiling was white. And I put a white chandelier in this tiny little brown desk and this little chair. And I just sat there with my laptop and channeled that book. And I woke up every day with just so much fear because of the trauma I'd been living in. And then I wrote the book to heal myself.
Wow.
And the book is called The Universe Has Your Back, Transform Fear into Faith.
Hmm.
And it makes me really emotional actually talking about it. And I think about that writing journey, and it really brings me to tears right now because I long for that feeling again, even though it was the most difficult time of my life.
Hmm.
It was the most spiritually aligned time of my life.
Yeah.
And that feeling is a felt sense that I am manifesting now as I move into this new phase of my life. I intend to align with that connection, that feeling of what it felt like writing that book so much more in everything I do now. That's my vision for myself right now.
Yeah. Does a book like where did this book, self-help, where did it come to you? In the same way or the concept? I know
Very
it's a,
different,
yeah,
very
okay.
different. So I think I've written all of my books for myself first, except for self-help.
Interesting.
Self-help, I lived first and
Okay.
then felt the call and the message, the download. Oh, girl, you got to go take this out into the world. Like, you
Yeah.
can't let this stay in the therapy office, right? Like, this has to be given. This is a gift. This is a gift. This is, you're a translator. Go take this is based on a therapy that has changed my life dramatically called internal family systems therapy, which we'll talk about. It's a therapy based on an inner family of parts of who we are and healing all those parts of ourselves so that we can live an unburdened, free flowing ease, life of ease and life of grace and harmony. And as a result of practicing that therapy and then getting trained in that therapy and then living the miracle of that therapy, I got the download in the clear direction from my inner wisdom and my higher power that it was my job to take my dear friend, Dr. Richard Schwartz's beautiful body of work, IFS, and turn it into self-help.
Amazing.
And so with his permission and a beautiful, I'll read maybe a little message from his forward because it's just so deeply moving to me. But
Yeah.
with his permission, I've been able to take this very dense, profound therapy that most, millions of people have experienced, but they've only folks that have the privilege of being able to afford a therapist or the bravery or the courage to go to those places in therapy and even access, because there aren't enough therapists doing IFS yet, right?
Mhm.
So it became clear to me that my mission for this one is to not write this for myself, to write this for the reader and share the gift of this practice with the masses in a way that they can bring it out of the therapist's office and into their own world. And to be super clear off the start with you on this, this isn't IFS. This is a self-help practice that I created based on the principles of IFS.
Got it. All right, so let's set the stage and like dig into what IFS is. I think if you offered to read a little bit of the forward, maybe that's a good way of introducing people to
Here's the book.
this concept. Amazing. I love the cover. It's a
I
powerful
designed, okay, this is a second, like this is the designer's design, but I went into Canva with my own vision of what I wanted it to be. And like with different fonts and stuff, I created this cover and I sent it to a designer. I was like, make this look better.
I love
And
it.
so here it is.
It all starts with Canva so many times.
I mean, I'm a full-blown Canva artist. So, you need any.
I mean, not to brag, but yeah, I think we both are.
I mean,
I like to
brag,
think of myself as one too.
because it's all there. And if you have an eye, you can
Yeah,
create anything.
exactly. Let's go.
So here's just a first paragraph of Dick Schwartz's forward. And once again, Dr. Richard Schwartz, Dick Schwartz, is the founder of Internal Family Systems Therapy, a beloved brother and friend to me, a mentor to me. And the therapy that is demystified in this book is from him. I just finished reading this book and there are tears in my eyes. I'm so grateful for and honored by what Gabby Bernstein has done here. I developed Internal Family Systems, IFS therapy, the approach she features in this book, over the past 4 decades and labored in relative obscurity for 3 of those decades. One of my dreams during those lean years was that a respected leader with both self-help and spiritual bona fides would bring IFS to the public in a safe way that did justice to the power of the model. That dream has come true with this book.
Amazing.
And that message to me is once again the why this is written for the reader. It's also, I wrote this book and I dedicated this book to Dick, because as someone who has, when you experience a gift, and this because you're a teacher and a healer, when you experience a gift as someone who is a communicator, you almost feel like you have no choice but to share it.
Yeah.
And my beloved friend and teacher has this incredible gift that he has brought to the world. And I know that myself, among many others who are in the devotion of his work, feel that call to be messengers for this work. And so this is the way I've chosen to do it.
How did you find it? How did you mentioned first living it and practicing it in your own life first? When did you first hear about this work?
So there's a lot of therapists out there that may not be trained in IFS, but are IFS informed. So they've found the model, they've experienced the model for themselves, they read about it, they really believe in it. And because there's, like I said, there's a sort of lack in the amount of people that have been trained because there's not enough trainers. It's like, this is something where I'm going to help Dick really democratize the trainings as well. So that's my hope for helping him. But so there's a lot of therapists using it that may not be trained in it. And I had a therapist, a beloved therapist, for 7 years and started working with her, about 9 years ago, 8 years ago. And she was using IFS model, even though she wasn't a trained IFS therapist, she was using the model with me. But she never really told me what she was doing, which nor would your therapist necessarily be like, this is the style of therapy I'm using, So I didn't really know what it was. But I knew that it was happening. Like I knew this with this thing. And it was really hard for me at first using this model because it's I'll explain it, but really simply put, it's the thesis is that we have these very common habits, behaviors, and belief systems that are the driving force of our life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, for me, it was like controlling or believing like if I don't do it, nobody else will, or I have to push and force to make it happen, or or just feeling very alone
Mm-hmm.
in in having to take care of myself and what I'm doing,
Mm-hmm.
and recognizing that those these aspects of ourselves, beliefs, patterns, behaviors, are actually protection mechanisms.
Mm-hmm.
And when we ask these protection mechanisms, how long have you been around? They're like, forever, or like since
Yeah.
I was a kid or since 5 years old or whatever. And
Right.
when we look back and we wonder a little bit more about, who are these protection mechanisms protecting, it becomes clear that they're protecting very young feelings, very, very very, very scary feelings. And so to really simplify this whole model, at a very young age, we all experience some form of trauma, big T or small t, being bullied in your classroom or being left by an alcoholic parent. Like these
Mm-hmm.
are, both trauma. Nevertheless, some are more extreme than others. But we experience these traumatic events. We build up a belief system that fear and that terror and that experience is actually my fault, right? I have the shame. I have to hold that shame. And we don't want to feel that impermissible fear, terror, inadequacy, or feelings of being unlovable ever again. And instantly, as little people, we build up protection mechanisms.
Yeah.
People pleasing because we feel like we can't be seen, or controlling because we feel out of control, or numbing out because it feels too overwhelming to be in the home that we're in, or whatever it might be. And we didn't, most people did not have Will Cole as a father or Gabby Bernstein as a mother, and they
Mm-hmm.
weren't pulled aside and given the gifts of how to process or co-regulate, or or be regulated by the parent. So in effect, they're left alone with their feelings, and they carry on. We carry on in protection mode. And so the thesis of IFS is to get to know these protector parts and help them feel safe. And in that experience of safety, an internal parent, an inner healer emerges. And that inner healer and that inner parent is what in IFS we call self. And self is the God within us, the spirit within us, the intuition within us. It's a creative force. It's a
Mm-hmm.
curious energy. It's a connected energy. It's these C qualities, as Dick has described: clarity,
Mm-hmm.
compassion, connection, curiosity, courage, confidence, creativity, and commitment. And when we're in that energy and that energy starts to expand inside of us, we intuitively know how to heal and safe and soothe and create safety
Mm-hmm.
for these extreme patterns, beliefs, and behaviors that have been running the show.
Wow.
And it's miraculous.
Yeah. So that you would normally, the format would be a patient, client, and the therapist, right? So is that how it would look like traditional therapy to person that would be doing IFS?
Yeah. IFS has only really been done in
Yeah.
therapeutic settings, maybe some workshopping and stuff, but it's been shown in the one-on-one dynamic until now, right? I mean,
Yeah,
maybe
right.
there's some instances where people have done this in other ways, but I'm not familiar with that. And so really it's been done in a one-on-one setting where the goal of the therapist is to hold that self energy, right? To be the compassionate, calm, curious presence, and to interview these parts rather than interview the
Got it.
person, interview these aspects of the person, right? And go through a
Interesting.
series of fleshing out and getting to know and curiosity towards. And then as you start to flesh out these aspects of these parts, more and more parts are revealed and more clarity is revealed. And as you start to just befriend these parts of someone, as they befriend those parts with the guidance of the therapist,
Mm-hmm.
more and more self emerges, and calmness comes forward, and confidence comes forward, and a settled connection. And as this therapist guided path happens, then the therapist can guide that person to go to the really young exiled part, the part that had the trauma, and then retrieve that part and unburden it.
Got
Now,
it.
this is the important distinction, though. Well, I am not touching those exiles, and nor should you in this book, right? That's for therapy. That's particularly, I hope, for IFS therapy or trauma-informed therapy.
Got it.
My hope is just to help the reader get to know these protection mechanisms, befriend these protection mechanisms
Mm-hmm.
through a 4-step process. It's very simple. And in connecting to these protection mechanisms, which are like little children inside of us,
Mm-hmm.
create a little sense of safety inside, which then allows these sort of hyper vigilant protectors to settle.
Mhm.
And as these parts of us start to settle, self energy emerges.
Got it.
Self energy is our natural state, right? So we've experienced self, right? Like when you're on the podcast, you are channeling in self right now. I feel it and I can tell you why. You're curious.
Mhm.
You're connected to me. You have clarity, right? You're clear about what you want to ask. There's confidence. There's courage to just go there and jump right in. So you're in self right now. That's my perception, and I can say that because I feel it.
Yeah. So it's like a flow state,
It's a flow state,
active
baby.
active present, like a holding space. I know people make fun of that now, but it's like that's really what it is, right? It's like a resonance that you feel.
It's the way you would say, like, I feel aligned with God, or I feel aligned
Yeah.
with spirit, or I feel like I'm in
Alignment.
Buddha nature. There's a beautiful quote in the book by Stephen Kranz. I'm going to just sort of butcher it a bit, but he's an IFS practitioner, and it's self is like the sun behind the clouds, and the self is always there. And when the
Yes.
clouds merge, self can be revealed naturally.
Right. And so many people mistake themselves for the clouds, right?
That's exactly right. We
Yeah.
become so blended with these protection mechanisms that we believe we are them. We
Yeah.
believe we are addicts. We believe we are control freaks. We refer to ourselves, I'm just a control freak, or I'm just a people pleaser. And no, those are parts of who we are.
Yeah.
And those parts of who we are working really, really hard to protect us.
Yeah. So the goal in a therapeutic setting with IFS, just to kind of repeat back to you and think I got this right, but is
Yep.
to realize where the self is, to expand the self, and to capture back, metaphorically, to recapture these sparks of exiled, pieces of light, sparks of light that have been walled up as self-protection. Are those sort of exiled parts of us as well, and we're trying to sort of integrate it all within self? How does that seem?
All parts are who we are.
Okay.
And the simply put, IFS is a practice of getting to know, getting into relationship with all parts of yourself,
Yeah.
so that those parts can receive the inner parent, the guidance and the wisdom and the support from self, so that they can feel safe to unburden the adult roles that they've been forced into and return to their natural childlike roles.
Got it. And those protection mechanisms serve a purpose for a time, right? Maybe as a child,
100%.
but it's to let yourself know you don't need to be in that state anymore.
Yeah, it's first and foremost, I think, the first big shift for me was witnessing these protectors as really powerful support systems that were really in place for a reason.
Right.
And so, 19 and a half years sober, I can look back and say thank you to my cocaine addict part and say, oh, girl, you were working hard to keep me safe.
Mm-hmm.
And say thank you to my controller part, because while she might have created a lot of chaos in the world, she also wrote 10 books in 14 years and she served a lot of souls. So these parts, while they might be extreme, are also doing good things in the world too, right? So the
Yeah.
goal is not to get rid of the parts. It's not to lose your edge, just soften your edges.
Yeah. I love that. It's a great way of putting it. Because you're absolutely right. The people that have done what you've done, that do big things in the world, it oftentimes in many ways can become from these early traumas that have caused these sort of hyper, how would you put it? Like hyper vigilant aspects of ourselves.
Yeah, I think that my favorite quote is the Rumi quote: "The wound is the place where the light enters you."
Yeah. Perfectly said.
So these experiences are extreme. And the reason that the subtitle of self-help is "This is your chance to change your life" is because, I was talking to somebody on an interview yesterday and they're like, well, Gabby, like, seems like you figured it all out. And I was like, huh. And I was like, my life is still kind of chaotic and I'm having meltdowns every once in a while right now. But maybe I did figure it all out, because even though I'm experiencing the parts and I'm able to see it as parts, and I'm able to know that there's safety inside and that I have self energy inside that can heal these long standing burdens, and that one step at a time I can unburden these belief systems that have been around for decades.
Mhm.
So that to me says that I've figured it all out. Not that I'm living in perfect harmony all the time, not that I'm not losing my shit here and there, and not that I'm, you know what I'm saying? Like, because all
Yeah.
that's happening. Well, we talked about it right when we first started,
Yeah.
but that I know where to go
Yeah. You
and
have
I
the
know that
tools.
there's safety inside.
Right. Absolutely. I think that's a really good point, especially in wellness and social media. People see us on social media, see other people, and they think, well, they have it all together and they're just floating, like a Buddha on a mountaintop and they have no problems and they never lose their temper. They never eat a food that, doesn't love them back. I mean, but the truth is, I mean, before we started recording, maybe just to share this, like arriving, right? If it's such a thing, or being in a more regulated, whole, grounded, safe space isn't the fact that, there's not going to be problems, but it's what do we
Mhm.
have to move through that season with grace, and not let it rattle you as much. So, like, how are you practicing what you've learned and what you're teaching in the book? How are you practicing it in your own life right now on the eve of book launch?
I practice it every single day, multiple times a day, and I'll actually take you through it. So first is having the awareness that my extreme triggers, reactions, behavioral patterns, undesirable feelings, like anxiety and rage and are not bad. They're parts of who I am. And
Mhm.
they're coming up because a young part is being triggered. And when that young part gets triggered, these protection mechanisms fly in. Control, rage, whatever it might be.
Mhm.
So that awareness is the first step, and the book will help you find that awareness. And I think most of us have some sense of awareness of these extreme patterns and behaviors and beliefs, or even just feelings, right? Like
Mhm.
feelings like anxiety or low level depression. These are protector parts. And what I do is I bring my 4-step practice to them. So, for example, recently a lot of chaos is sort of occurring around me because some of the systems in my business need to be changed, and there's just things are out of control. And so everyone sort of felt like everyone was running around with like a chicken with their head cut off, and it was really me mostly feeling that way and requiring certain things but not knowing how to ask for it or knowing what it is, because I'm just in
Mhm.
that state of reaction, right?
Yeah.
So controlling and raging and mad and freaking out and looking for help from everybody that can't help me because I have to help myself.
Mhm.
And so what do I do instead? I check in. And so I'll notice, okay, there's a feeling of rage coming upon me. I'm going to go step aside from whatever it is that I'm doing. I have enough response between the stimulus. I have enough awareness of the stimulus
Mhm.
that I can step away before I respond. And so I'll step away and I'll do the 4 steps. First step is to choose to check inward rather than check out. So checking out might be overly controlling, slacking everybody 1,000 times, raging on my husband, whatever, right? That's
Yeah.
checking out. So instead of doing that, I'll check in. And so the choosing to check in is just the simplest step. It's not that simple. It's actually might be the hardest step to having that awareness to, okay, I don't want to check out, I'm going to check in. But that's the first step. So instead of, I'm not going to go to the refrigerator and binge, I'm going to turn inward. I'm not going to go rage on my husband, I'm going to turn inward. I'm going to stop myself in my tracks of doing that, picking up the drink, and I'm going to turn inward. Or 3 days after I had that binge, I'm going to turn inward, whatever it is, however you can get there. First step, choose to check in.
Okay.
The second step is once I check in with that part of me that's activated, the control, the rage, whatever, the anxiety, whatever it is, I become curious about it. And so I ask myself, where is it in my body? What feelings, thoughts, or sensations are attached to it?
Mhm.
How long has it been around? And I get to know the part. Who's the part inside? Who's inside? And once I feel a slight connection to that part, I then compassionately connect. And I ask that third step, ask the part, what do you need? And that part will always say something like, I need clarity, or I need to take a break, or I need to rest, or I
Mhm.
need to speak up. It's a little kid, right? It's a little kid
Yeah.
inside. I need to
Yeah.
dance, right? Like I need to move.
Yeah.
And then the fourth step is to check for self and see if a new energy has emerged. And so you check for those C qualities of self. Do I feel more calm? Do I feel more connected to this part of me? Do I feel compassion towards this part of myself? Do I feel more creativity moving through me, or courage to speak up, or connectedness to the part, or clarity? Do I have more clarity about what I need right now? And always, if I go through these 4 steps for 1 minute, 10 minutes, a 40-minute meditation with the part, I'll always feel those self-like qualities coming through.
Beautiful. What, so,
Rinse
okay,
and repeat.
I love that. So you go into great detail and teach us how to do these steps in the book. What do you say to somebody, and I'm thinking of that person that's out there listening, even myself, like if I went through those steps on certain things and that part, I determine, okay, that part that's maybe giving me some anxiety really wants certainty. What do you say to somebody that wants certainty in uncertain times?
Yep.
Yeah, where do you what would you say there?
So if the part's saying I want certainty, what I do in the book is I let the part, the goal is to let the part speak for what it wants and what it needs.
Yeah.
And then when you go to the 4th step and you see the shift inside, because even just allowing the part to say what it needs allows it to feel seen.
Mm-hmm.
And so the part doesn't really want certainty. The part really wants to be seen,
Mm,
right? It's a little kid inside of you.
yeah.
It really, what we all really want is to feel safe, seen, soothed, and secure, and loved. We want a parent.
Yeah, absolutely. What was it like for you growing up? Or did you grow up in a spiritual home? I mean, you have such a deep reservoir of spiritual teachings now in your life. Was spirituality something that you grew up with?
Yeah. I grew up in a very spiritual home with a mother who was a devotee of Guru Mai and the Siddha Yoga movement. And I was brought to ashrams and named by the guru, and in a home where my mother would go in the room and be very chaotic, and then go in her bedroom and meditate, and the mantras and the incense and the music, and she'd come out very different. And so that spiritual seed was planted. But I also was in a home that was very chaotic. I experienced trauma as a child. I did not have the right parents. My parents did not really offer me the safe regulation that I needed. And uh, I lived with a lot of fear. But I
Yeah.
was taught to meditate when I was, 15 years old, 13 years old, or really even younger than that.
Yeah.
So the spiritual seed was planted. I always had a psychic connection, though I couldn't necessarily put words to it, but I could feel spirit. I could hear spirit. I could, when I began meditating regularly, when I was 15 years old, 16 years old, I started to feel my extremities tingle. I could sense the almost like a blanket of peace coming over me. Like I really felt spirit.
Hmm.
I felt my guides. I knew that there was angels and guides around me. So I've always had that connection. When I was in middle school, I was the president of the Jewish regional youth group, and I was just like drawn to spirituality. I went to spiritual Jewish camp, and all I wanted to do was sort of lead in these spiritual environments. So I would like lead these groups of like 300 teenagers in the temple sleeping over for the weekend, and like have these experiences like a Sherpa at 14. So I think, my path was laid before me, truly.
Interesting. Was that difficult? People that grew up in spiritual homes or religious homes, you hear this and they have this like church hurt or religious hurt, or you could have spiritual hurt where it's like you grew up with these tools that maybe there was good aspects to them, but people are people and doing the best they can or maybe not. But there's a lot, it's messy sometimes and people can be hurt. Did that turn you off to spirituality at some point because of that
You know,
dysregulated youth?
n- n- I turned my back on it in my early 20s. And it's not that I didn't always have my stack of spiritual self. I Shakti Gawain and Deepak and Louise Hay and all my Wayne Dyer books next to my bed. But
Yeah.
I was convinced that there was another way to get to safety. And so I started becoming very addicted, or really my addictive tendencies started to take on, because this is, trauma response. So I
Mhm.
got, I was living with an unresolved memory of trauma that I didn't know was there. So I was
Mhm.
living in hypervigilance, trying to control everything, and severely codependent. That I put down the boyfriend, picked up the cocaine, fast, hard drug addiction. By the time I was 25, I was like staring at that stack of self-help books being like, I want that, but I'm
Mhm.
not there. And
Yeah.
it was a spiritual intervention. It was a desire to get clean and sober.
Mhm.
October 2nd, 2005, on my knees saying, God, universe, who's ever out there, I need a miracle. And hearing an inner voice say, you can get clean and live a life beyond your wildest dreams.
Wow.
And that was a huge turning point for me. Got sober that day, have been sober ever since, and then have been on a journey of unlearning fear and remembering love. And
Mhm.
10 books have told the story.
Yeah. So you're right, as you're like you said earlier, like these books came out of your own experience. So every time like you almost got a different level of learning on this path of healing, you put it out there for the world for other people that are on the same journey or a similar journey, right?
Exactly. It's like, I think back to the books. I was thinking I might want to do like a live talk at some point, or like a weekend called the Gabby Eras Tour.
You should.
Where I
That's what I
take
think
you
of
through.
now that I know that.
It's like I mean, I started writing books at 27 years old and I'm 45 now, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Crazy. So my first book came out when I was 28. So it's like so my first book was Add More Ing to Your Life. It was like a hip guide to happiness. And it's just where I wrote where I was. My second book was Spirit Junkie, which really needs a resurgence. That book kills. It was like a memoir that I wrote before I was 30, but it was really a book about addiction and codependency. And it really has helped so many people get clean and sober. And then I read a book called May Cause Miracles, which just so many people love that book. It's like a sleeper hit.
yeah.
And then I wrote a book um, called Miracles Now, which was at a time when I was uh, deep in a yoga path that I've now realized was not the path I have had to denounce the path, unfortunately.
Wow.
Um, and but again, like I think that we're drawn to whatever we're drawn to at the time, and it serves us
Yeah,
deep.
for a season.
And it's just a lot of nasty shit came out about this organization, and I'm not going to even give voice to it here.
Okay, I'm
Probably
now I'm
knows.
curious. We'll talk about it offline.
I
I'm
mean,
curious.
look, let's put it this way. A lot of gurus have failed us. And that's why I actually wrote a book called You Are the Guru, because the, the idea that a yogic teacher, I mean, we've just seen it too many times where these teachers are rapists and,
Got it.
and
Yeah.
manipulators and
Well, that's what it is. It's like
nonsense.
like when it can start off with the best of intentions, right? But then you get sort of the people together, and religion and spirituality can kind of be conflated there. Yeah, and people can abuse what started off with good intentions.
And I think the greatest thing I learned from that is also just to never to not be the guru, right?
Yeah,
Uh, I don't know, maybe when I was younger, I might have like been more, identifying as like the teacher. Now I just know I'm here. I have a path. I'm a teacher. I'm going to serve. I'm
yeah,
going to have a lot of fun doing it.
hmm
I do not want to ever be referred to as a guru.
yeah.
I want to be seen as someone who helps you identify your teacher within.
Got it. So that's where you feel, and I can hear what you're saying and see what you're saying is that when you get that consolidated like power, if you will, many organizations kind of lose their way.
And then anything that was good of it is lit on fire,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
such an unfortunate thing.
it is an
Yeah.
unfortunate thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so you definitely need to do the eras live
Yeah.
event.
And then
I'll
there's
be
the
front
universe
row.
has your back, and it
Yes.
just carries on. And then I wrote, then I started sort of in the later years after Universe and after Super Attractor, which is a big manifesting book. I wrote a book about judgment called Judgment Detox, which I think is one of my most important books, but it's the least read because the title needs to,
Interesting.
I think I should rechange the title to, something more sexy, but it's a great book. And then it went into, more into this personal development, because as you see, I'm growing up, right? And so
Hmm.
as I'm growing up and I remember the trauma, the book after I wrote, Universe to heal myself, but then the next book out of me, a few books later actually, was this book about trauma recovery. And that was Happy Days, my book prior to this, self-help. And
Yeah.
in Happy Days, I wrote a whole chapter about internal family systems therapy. So sort of like a spiritual body keeps the score. I mean, it
Yeah.
may be a little bit egotistical to say that because that book is so magic. The body keeps the score. But what I wanted to do is write a book from the perspective of the trauma survivor,
Hmm.
introducing the trauma modalities.
Got
And
it.
then one of them was IFS, and then that led to this next book.
Beautiful. And you mentioned in the forward of the book when you were reading that he wanted there to be a spiritual aspect to the voice, and like it's coming true in your book. So was his intention entirely, there is a spiritual current within IFS, even if people don't know it?
Yeah, and my friend Dick is a very spiritual man, and he and as far as I'm concerned, he channeled this material. His guides
Mhm.
gave it to him, and he collaboratively created this work. He was trained in family systems therapy, and he was working with women who were struggling with bulimia. And in doing sort of his traditional systems therapy with them, he kept hitting a wall. And then as he started to sort of interview these parts of them rather than like the family dynamic, but
Mhm.
recognizing that that systems therapy could be applied to the inner family inside, they started to feel more seen. And then this new energy would emerge, and he'd say, well, where are you now? You feel so nice in this room. And they'd just be like, that's myself.
Mhm.
So he discovered this through his systems experience, through his journey as a therapist, through his ability to hear his intuitive voice. And
Yeah.
so I'll speak for him. Dick is in a a field that's traditional.
Yeah.
It's a field that maybe it wouldn't be like, oh, this is spiritual, but I'll tell you this. I mean, this is spiritual therapy.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's growing up in a spiritual home. You mentioned like being in the Jewish youth groups in school. Has your understanding of God changed over those years, those decades, those eras, or no? Is it just
Oh
kind of coming
yeah.
back? Yeah, how has it changed?
Yeah. Well, I think I didn't have like a faith necessarily growing up. I didn't talk about God, but I felt and I knew that there was a presence beyond my physical sight,
Hmm.
and I identified it as an angelic force and as guides. And so
Hmm.
I felt that the veil had been lifted for me. So this I was in this world, but I had a knowing that
Hmm.
there was a spiritual presence beyond my physical sight around me. Because I could feel it. I could feel the tingling in my extremities. I could feel the brushing of my head when I would meditate in particular.
Hmm.
I could feel myself at times being directed in certain rooms, or I'd pick up a book and the book would get hot and it would pull me to the register. And I'd be like, this is what I got to read. And so these experiences were sort of undeniable. And even if I didn't speak of them, I knew them to be true. But I didn't really have a God concept. And then as I started to teach spirituality, I began to intuitively define what God meant to me.
Hmm.
And one of the greatest things I took from my 12-step spiritual recovery was the concept of a God of your own understanding. And that was so resonant for me. When I first was getting sober, my sponsor would be like, get on your knees and pray to God. I'd be like, I don't know what God is, but I'm going to do what you do because I like what you got.
Hmm.
And as I just continued to heal, I became more and more clear that the God of my own understanding was that there's an ever present energy of love within me and around me, always guiding me and supporting me. And it's my choice to tune into it or not.
Hmm.
And then as a spiritual teacher, it has been my job to fulfill that same function that is taught in the 12 steps of help people identify and crack open to a God of their own understanding.
Hmm.
And as I've grown from therapeutically, personal development, and spiritually, I've gotten closer and closer and closer to that relationship with God. And it's not that it's been redefined, it's just that I trust it more and more and more. And so I
Interesting.
live a God driven life, even though I'm very much caught in the human form at times and can be, in those parts and blah, blah, blah. I always pray for God to help. This morning I woke up and I began my day with thank you, God, for revealing to me the exact steps I need to take to unburden these beliefs that are holding me back.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I mean, it's 100% beautiful. I mean, has that um like for you, where is that at in relationship to seeing religion and oh, it's like this is the way, that's the way, that's the way, versus this, it seems like the sort of above, there's something that transcends religion.
I choose to see religion through a really positive lens. And the lens I choose to see it through is it is a home where people find God.
Hmm.
Now, look, religion's caused a lot of trouble in the world, and that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
But the community and the home where you find God is all that really matters to me.
Hmm.
Now, when that God concept is battered by human conditioning, that's when it kind of goes wrong, right? But I was on a podcast yesterday with these three amazing women, and it turned into the coolest conversation. Well, I'm going to shout them out. The Wind Down podcast, and I was talking to Janet Kramer and Kat, her and her two co-hosts, and one of her co-hosts was saying how she feels like she doesn't know what her purpose is, but she does know that every day she's with her family and her community, and and she's there to share the love of Jesus, but she still doesn't know what her purpose is. And I said, oh, honey, you just said your purpose out loud. You, of most humans that I've ever met in my life, are fulfilling your function more than you could even imagine. To be and spread the love of Jesus. For her, that's the love. For me, that would be the love of God or the love of spirit. It doesn't matter how you define it, but for her, it's the love of Jesus. To instill that in her children, to teach that with her friends, to be that in the grocery store. That's our purpose.
Yeah.
And that was like, the coolest thing. So that's why I think when it comes to religion, just so much of it is just semantics.
Yeah.
So I don't care what you call it. I care that you call upon it.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And that as long as it is in alignment with love, it is God driven.
Right. What's the shortest and probably the most powerful verse in the Bible is God is love. And what is that? Defining that love, right? Yeah. What you mentioned guides earlier. For people that maybe have heard that, don't really know, like, what's that mean to you, guides?
So I believe, and again, I always offer this in my books with a grain of salt, because again, my job is not to say my way or the highway. This is just my faith. You can be curious about it, or you can turn your back to it. Take what you want and leave the rest. I believe in my knowing that we have ancestors, angels, spirit guides that are working on our behalf at all times to help us realign our worldly fears with the love of God. And so if you think of an angel is to bridge the gap of your egoic fear and return it to the source of love that is God.
Understood.
So I choose to live my life in co-creation and collaboration with the divine realm. And in that realm, I believe there are my late mentor, Dr. Wayne Dyer, Louise Hay, my grandmother, my angels. I have an angel that I know is called Lily. I can see her in my mind's eye. I can feel her. I have another angel guide called Peter. They both come in different energies. In fact, I'm channeling right now as we talk. So you see this hand goes numb when I start to channel. And so when I start to speak on behalf of these guides, I can feel their presence. So as soon as I begin to attune to that energy and that belief, they become real, and they get around me, right? And they are really just like a team of, like, almost consider it like a team of spiritual teachers and therapists and coaches and protectors and bouncers, and like they're around you, just hooking you up and guiding your thoughts, right? So we can communicate with guides by asking for signs. We can get those signs through songs, right? So a great story is when I was trying to conceive my son, Oliver, I was really struggling to conceive, and month after month, I wasn't conceiving. And I kept praying to my guides, show me a sign of lilies that my child is on the way. And I did my first round of IUI, which is that, sort of a timed conception, is the first round. And I was expecting it to work. And I got the news that it didn't work. And I was so devastated by that. And I went into my husband's office and I sat on his lap and I was crying, and his phone was locked on the desk, like completely locked. And I'm crying. I'm like, when is baby coming? I haven't seen my sign. All of a sudden, a song starts to play from the locked phone. And the song was this Sam Amidon song. And the lyrics were, "Way go Lily, way go Lily." The song title was "Way Go Lily." Wow. And then I looked closer, and the album title is "I Saw the Sign."
Oh my gosh. That's beautiful. I mean,
and so
yeah,
I have millions of stories like that, Will.
Yeah.
Millions.
I mean, I see them in my life. I always think of them as like God winks or some sort of when you see synchronicity in your life or serendipity, I see it all the time. I think probably they're for all of us, right? It's just a matter of do we recognize it or realize it or not when they do happen, right? And having eyes to see and kind of an openness to it. What's speaking of signs, like I know I'm not the only one, but I'm like one of those people, and I'm coming from a functional medicine perspective. I don't understand it, but I know it's something bigger than me is when you see these random synchronicities like 11:11, and then you see a lot of people on social media talking about it. I've heard you talk about it. Like, what's the meaning behind that? Is it just confirmation bias, like I'm noticing it, or not? Is there something more to it?
Well, here's the thing. Guides will show us their presence through synchronicities and signs that we will resonate with.
Mhm.
So one, you could ask for the specific sign, universe, show me a blue butterfly. So I have a deceased child. I carried a child for 5.5 months and I had
Mm.
to let him go. And my son Owen shows me his presence with a blue butterfly. And so that was my request to him. Show me the blue butterfly everywhere. He's all over the place. The when we see numbers in sequence, they're like winks from the universe.
Mhm.
And from a spiritual perspective, guides have given the messages that these signs have different meanings. So, I see 111 is this is your angels are around you. And if you're thinking something negative in that moment, reframe it and ask for your guides to redirect your thoughts. That's
Mhm.
it. You don't even
Yeah.
have to reframe it. Just say, thank you for redirecting my thoughts right now. Right.
Yeah.
Or reinforce a thought or belief that you want to feel. And so we can have these sort of universal signs from the universe, and we also can decide what they are for us, right? So there may be a song that we hear all the time, and that song just reminds us of our grandmother, and we just decide, you know what, that's Grammy. That's
Mhm.
Grammy showing up. It's for the individual to decide and intuitively decide what those signs mean to them,
Mhm.
because you can be in sync and flow with spirit or not. It's your choice. You have free will. When you choose to live in that alignment with the spiritual realm, your life becomes a lot easier. You feel a lot more aligned. You
Mhm.
manifest more effortlessly. You don't feel as alone. You know where to turn. You have a greater connection to an intuitive force, a creative force. You have more access to self, right? Because when you're in self, back to self help, when you're in self, you're in spirit.
Mhm. You, I'll see. It's again, it's maybe small to other people, and maybe well, you're just reading into things. But like, I'll notice it on when I'm looking at the schedule for the day of telehealth patients. I'll have the most random synchronicities with the people on the schedule. People from all around. We're talking all around the world. There's not that
Yeah.
like one town, but they'll be like their birthdays will be all the same year or the same month, or they will be from the two of them right next to each other will be from the same town. They've never met each other before, or they have the same profession. It is every day there's some random rhythm that you have to look. Like, I'm not necessarily looking for it, but it's easy to see when you're going over cases. Wow, I just saw someone with the same exact thing. It's probably part of that same synchronicity
Well,
that we're talking about, right?
intuitively, what I'm hearing from your guides is that if you are welcoming that, I don't want to
I
certainly
would
chat.
love that. I would
Yeah.
love that.
So they're one grateful that you're seeing their signs. Okay. So there I see clapping of hands, which is like applauding you for your awareness and attunement to their guidance. And what that synchronicity and guidance is a wink from your guide saying you are on the right track. Keep doing what you're doing. And even though they're saying this, but like just sort of for word's sake, your celebrity rises and rises. They really don't want you to leave it may change, but they want you in the one-on-one. They
Yeah.
want to keep you. I don't know if that resonates with you right
Yeah,
now,
it
but
does.
they don't want you to, maybe it softens or whatever, but they don't want you to lose that, because that is what keeps you connected to your mission and your purpose. And
Yeah.
you are saying too that your voice and I'm using the word celebrity just because the word they're giving me, but like that celebrity will rise, but you always need that anchor home. And the anchor they're showing me is the calendar, just that vision that you mentioned. And that synchronicity in the calendar is saying you're on the right track.
Gabby, honestly, this was a blessing for you to even do this. I mean, this was not planned, obviously, because that's how I've been feeling. I feel like, okay, God, what do you want from me? like as seasons change, like how can I be of service? Things change, things evolve, there's more responsibilities. I'm only one person. How can I show up in the way that you want me to show up? And it's hard to know that path, but it's always I feel people will, like other doctors will say, well, how are you still seeing people one on one? And
Yeah.
I'm like, it keeps me sharp and grounded, but I'm like, am I doing the wrong thing? Because these other people in functional medicine are saying, why are you still doing this?
Yeah.
But you gave me confirmation.
Yeah. It's making me very emotional. If you can see, like I can feel the pull. They're saying don't worry about the how. They're saying ask. They want you to scribe in a journal, writing out their direction. They're using you, my love. They're using you. I'm sorry, I start using words like my love and my,
Yeah.
because that's their words, right? But
Yeah.
they're using you as a messenger for healing. Now more than ever is what they just said. Like knock knock, we're gonna need you. And the one-on-one is your core.
Yeah.
It's the core.
Oh, this was a blessing. Thank you. Seriously. Who would have guessed I would have got a one-on-one session with Gabby Bernstein on the podcast in front of the world? Thank
It's
you.
because you're available for it, right? It's because you're in self and you're tuned in, and also you're aware of your guides, so it was very easy for them to come through, right?
Beautiful.
Like if you were in resistance to that, I might have heard the message, but I wouldn't have had the pull to speak it,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, I'm ready. I'm every day. I mean, every day I start our for the past 15 years, we start off, we go over the schedule, but we start a day with prayer and meditation. Like I want to be of service, but it was like this, I felt like this transition season of figuring that out, but you definitely shifted that for me. So thank you.
Yeah, and there's a balance and you'll find it, and it's not going to be, it's a season, right? The
Right.
seasons will change, but there's still the core.
Yeah, love it. My friend, I could talk to you forever, but the podcast, it's called The Art of Being Well. At the end of every episode, we have your art of being well. What's the, shifting gears a little bit, but what's the worst tasting healthy food that you eat? Do you have one? Something that you don't do for the taste, that doesn't taste good, but you do it for its supportive benefits?
I do it every single day, and it's not terribly tasting, but I just swallow it. Is spirulina and chlorella tablets. So I
Yeah,
do I do probably like 15
yeah,
spirulina and then 15 chlorella. And this is a new habit. And God, do I feel better?
I love it. Is it energy bits?
I use energy bits and I use the sun chlorella.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. Both good brands.
Yeah. I
What
like both.
do you take any supplements? I mean, that's kind of a supplement, but it's a
I
food.
take 100, like too many. Well, so I'm in perimenopause, pretty menopausal numbers, frankly, but I still have a period. Um, but I went hardcore into it. I think I was in perimenopause since I was 35. I just didn't have the diagnosis until now
Mhm.
because it's zeitgeist, and thank God it is. And I hope that you do whatever you can for us because we women need you, my love. Please help us. Write about it, speak about it, help everybody.
Yeah,
So I'm on HRT. I am taking a lot of support for that, right? So I'm taking my DHEA. There's this nice supplement called DIM or whatever that helps me
yeah,
process
yeah.
the uh, the,
Mhm.
the estrogen and progesterone, and then I'm taking my regular digestive enzymes and what else? Like obviously fish oils and um, just I'm juicy, man. I got it all.
You got it down.
I
I love
drink
it.
kefir every day with my protein powder,
I love it.
mushrooms, lots of adaptogens. I love adaptogens.
Amazing.
So I'm a bioidentical juiced up whatever, but I feel good. My hair is thick. I'm 45 and I'm thriving
That's
finally.
amazing. That's amazing. What's somewhere you haven't been to that's like on your it's gonna happen. It's just hasn't
Mm,
happened yet.
what a cool question. That I have not been to. I don't feel well. Okay, I'm studying Spanish with Duolingo, and I had my first talk in Mexico City in February, not in Spanish, like poquito español, but I can't give a talk in Spanish yet, but es mi sueño hablar en español, okay? And I do think like I've been to Spain, but like giving talks in Spanish speaking countries is sort of there is sort of a Latin draw to and a pull to speak on behalf of this work in Spanish. And so that's why I'm really committed to learning Spanish.
Love it. What's some place that you've been to that should be on other people's bucket list? It's like an unsung place that more people should visit.
I don't want to say it because I don't want more people to go.
They won't tell anybody. The listeners won't tell anybody.
It's not that unsung. I mean, it's very sung right now, but Portugal is my
Oh
jam.
yeah, that's the
So,
place, man. I
yeah.
haven't been, but no, it's
Yeah.
everybody's surfing in
We go
Portugal.
every summer now. We go in the summertime. And instead of going to like Martha's Vineyard, we go to like the Euro Martha's Vineyard,
I love it.
And yeah, it's the jam.
What's been the most spiritual place you've been to?
Mm. Well, once again, back to the gurus, right? The fallen gurus, the heartbreaking, disgusting truths that come forward that unfortunately kind of ruins the connection, but another guru I followed that really did offer me the practice and the community offered me like the most profound spiritual awakening and connection to my guides, but it unfortunately turned out to be like really, really dark. But
Mm.
I used to follow a medium in Brazil who and that space was the most spiritually aligned, in that there was real spiritual work happening there, and real healing work happening there, and people walking out of wheelchairs, and full-blown healings and emotional visual healings I experienced on my own, and channeling. But unfortunately that energy was used for very, very dark things, and or that the man behind it was in
Mhm.
jail now, and it
Oh my
was
gosh.
so I don't
Well,
know, like I don't want to take away the spiritual connection to that though.
yeah, got it. Well, there could be good and messy things, right? I mean, there can absolutely be. It's complicated for many situations like that. Do you this is a question I wanted to ask you is do you know what Enneagram you are?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm an 8-7, an 8 with a 7 wing. I
Okay.
think that there is a chance that in this new year I might move more 7 than 8,
Yeah.
which would be a big deal for me. 7 is
Interesting.
the enthusiast and the 8 is the challenger.
Yeah.
And I think that the more I heal, the more the enthusiast can rise and the challenger can soften.
Yeah. Interesting. So you'll vacillate to 7 wing 8 versus 8 wing 7.
Maybe, or
Yeah.
that the eight becomes less extreme, right? Because
Yeah.
these enneagrams are like parts. So as they soften, they can be in their extreme roles or they can be in their soft roles, right? So I'm
Yeah.
hoping the extreme 8 can soften. And I
Yeah.
love being 8. It's the way I've been able to be an entrepreneur and create and lead, but
Mhm.
I'd like it to soften a little.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And there's healthy versions of these things,
Healthy
right?
versions,
Healthy
exactly.
version. What is the weirdest or maybe most out of the box, unconventional thing that you've done for wellness, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, that you're willing to admit on a podcast?
Okay, this is so gross. I shared it once on one other podcast, but like I feel like because I love you and I feel like I want to be your best friend. I'm gonna give you this
All right.
soundbite. You
I want
better
to
not use it. You better not use this as a bit on a short or a reel. You promise?
I mean, I have to tell their media. They have to. We'll
Sign
control it.
this in my contract. We will not be doing. Um, so when I was 15 or 16, I was brought up homeopathic. Did not take any. I didn't take a prescription drug until I was in postpartum depression at 29 years old. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, meanwhile, I needed them. And I'm glad for prescription drugs today and the balance of the two. Right.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I just wasn't brought up that way. So I was brought up with like all these kinds of like weird homeopathic ways of doing things. And I was getting sick all the time because I was living with trauma. So the trauma was creating a lot of hypervigilance, which created a lot of, microbiome issues and gastro issues. And I was really unwell. And I was really sick at one point. My mom was friends with this like super hippie guy that was like taking colloidal silver and all those things. And he told me to drink my pee.
Okay.
And I did.
I love that someone said that because it's a thing. It wasn't just so that you may seem less abnormal. It's a thing still in the
It's a
wellness
thing,
world.
right? It's
Yeah.
a thing. I mean, do
How,
people still do that though? Is
oh,
that
they
like,
still do. So are we talking, did you chill it? Was it room temperature?
no, I was just like 15 on the toilet. I just like took it in a glass and drank it.
What did you think that at that point? You were like, I'm willing to do anything
I
or
was so sick and I was sick all the
mm,
time when I was young. I was sick all the time up until really, honestly, I hate, I want to say this actually here for your listeners, but I lived with a undiagnosed anxiety disorder for so many years. And when I had postpartum, and when I went through postpartum, I think I was also in perimenopause, but I didn't know that. So I
Hmm.
didn't go the hormonal route, which might have been very beneficial for me to support me. But I did take an antidepressant at the time because I was suicidal. And that
Hmm.
antidepressant brought me to such a sense of an inner safety inside that my gut relaxed, like, because I was no longer in hypervigilance. So
Hmm.
things could settle naturally. And so I only started to feel real well-being actually after having taken that that antidepressant. I didn't take the antidepressant and not do all the therapy and do all the gut healing and do the SIBO healing and all the, all the
Hmm.
things I did.
Hmm.
Both went hand in hand. But
Yeah.
I needed that serotonin support to get to a baseline of safety
Yeah.
to even do the deeper healing work.
Yeah. Both and not either or many
That's
times.
right. And I
Yeah.
like saying things like that here because I want to give those postpartum mamas who are listening to you permission to,
Yeah.
yes, go get your hormones checked in postpartum and do HRT if you need it with your doctor. And it's okay to take an antidepressant when you are in a chaotic biochemical
Yeah.
condition.
Get your head above water and figure out what's next. Yeah. Thank you for that. My friend, this has been such a blessing. Thank you so much for coming. Where do people get the book and learn about these amazing things you're doing?
The book is called Self-Help. This is your chance to change your life. And we talked a lot about spiritual stuff and manifesting and connecting to spirit. And I actually think that even though this is a book that's based on a therapy, it's actually my most spiritual book. And it's my most greatest manifesting book because well, we manifest what we believe.
Yeah.
And many of us are believing things we don't want to believe. So this book helps you undo the belief systems that are holding you back from being in alignment with what you truly want to create in your life. And that, my friend, is what this message is. So you can
I
find
can't
it
wait.
wherever you get your books, Amazon, deargabby.com, wherever you go.
Amazing. And you read the audiobook.
Always read my own audio. Yeah.
Amazing. My friend, thank you so much for coming on. Come back anytime.
I love you.
Love you too.